Learn to make the best and easiest sourdough bread. In this video, I'm not only going to show you how to make the best sourdough loaf and covering all the basics, but we're going to be discussing how to get the perfect ear, the perfect bubbly crust, some scoring and shaping techniques, and some optional ways to bake. Make sure you watch until the end for all the extra tips, and let's get into it. Okay guys, the full recipe and all of the measurements will be in the description box below, so let's focus on what matters, the bread. To our active starter, we added a little bit of olive oil, which you can omit if you're a purist or more experienced, but it does make for a more forgiving dough with a really plush crumb. Now we go right in with some warm filtered water and some salt. Again, if you are more experienced, you can add the salt later, but for this loaf, it's not necessary. I do recommend using a kitchen scale, especially while you're beginning and you're getting to know your bread. If you're interested in any of the tools that I use, they'll be linked below. Okay, after we weigh out all of our wet ingredients and mix them together, we're gonna add our flour. Now, I do recommend bread flour. One of the questions I get asked all the time is if you can use all-purpose flour. And while yes, this is possible, bread flour has a higher protein content, which helps with better water absorption and an overall better texture of the bread. It also aids to some better gluten development in the dough, especially when we go to stretch and fold and shape the dough. And while that might be interesting, let's get back to showing you how to make the best bread right away. You might notice I'm using a fork. PSA from a chef of 20 years, guys. Stainless steel is the only thing I will use on my dough and on my starter. Now, people love to get really mad about this. Metal is bad. Don't use metal. My starter doesn't like it. Wrong. Your starter may not like other metals like silver or aluminum, and it definitely does not want a wooden spoon. Now, if you've been using one and your starter is fine, great. You've gotten lucky. But I would switch to stainless steel right away. This is one of the fastest ways to spread bacteria and kill a starter. And no, I am not using one of those dough whisks, and you don't need one. And I will also never try to sell you one. But what is on the end of that dough whisk? Stainless steel. Long story short, a fork is fine. This is just a light mix, guys. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're looking for a shaggy dough. We're gonna cover this and let it sit for 1 hour for a very untraditional auto lease. 1 hour later, and a lot has already started to happen. Let's zoom in here. The flour has absorbed all of the wet ingredients nicely. And while it is sticky, it's not overly wet or unmanageable. This is our first set of stretch and folds. Now, this is optional, but we still do this first set to make sure everything is sufficiently mixed and to develop a little bit of gluten. I do recommend the latter 3 sets, but life gets busy. And while you won't get quite as high of a rise, don't let this stop you from making the bread. You can be pretty rough with this first set. You'll notice I'm really moving it around, developing gluten, kind of trying to form a ball, making sure everything is mixed in. Some of the little bits of olive oil are still there. That's okay. They will all go away later. Give her a pat because you love her, and let's get her covered back up. 30 minutes later, we're ready for our second set. You can go as long as an hour, so don't worry too much about the time in between. But this time, we're really gonna stretch her. You can see just how much has happened here in that short window. I'm able to really lift up high, shake it, jiggle it around a whole lot, and then bring it back down and fold it right back onto itself. Now that we're looking at more of a uniform mass of dough and less of a big glob of flour and water, we can tell several things from this. One, we know the starter was active. We know that it's healthy. We know that the yeast are doing what they need to do. You'll also be feeling a difference in the general structure of the dough. Pay attention to this, because over time you're going to get to know your bread and what works for you. Things like temperature and environment can cause variables, so after a few loaves of playing with your dough, you're going to feel like you've got it down. This is now our third set of stretch and folds with 30 minutes in between, and I'm starting to feel a lot of air in the dough, so I'm being a little bit more gentle this time. I'm still gathering the dough and stretching it up pretty high, but I don't need to work as hard as I did before. You're just going to go ahead and fold this onto itself sort of in a ball shape, and this is when we're going to go ahead and start our bulk ferment. It's time to cover and leave it alone for about 6 hours. Now, this can vary widely based on temperature. So how do you know when the bulk ferment is done? First, it should be about doubled. Second, it's going to fall out of the bowl pretty easily. You're not going to really have to pull. Onto the shaping. A properly fermented dough should peel away from your clean surface easily, so you shouldn't have to use much flour. This is my beginner's pull and shape method. You'll see that I'm not knocking any air out. I'm just pinching and bouncing the dough, clasping it together at the top to bring it together. However, later in the video, we're going to be covering some other shaping methods. I like this one. I use it a lot. It's perfect for beginners, super easy, and it creates a lot of tension in the dough, which is what we want. Now, do you need a banneton? No. If you don't have one, a bowl and a tea towel is fine. Just a small sprinkling of flour will do here, guys, and we're going to cover and let her bulk ferment for another 30 minutes on the counter. After that, it's time to let her sleep. Let's put her in the refrigerator and we'll see her tomorrow. One of the reasons I like this recipe, guys, is because after you get to know it, it kind of makes itself. I can promise you, as a busy mom, we always have fresh bread in the house and it's never a problem. This is especially true if you opt out of the stretch and folds. Okay, so you might notice my parchment looks kind of worn. There's no need to use a new piece every time if you're using it just for this bread. I keep mine in my Dutch oven and I use it up to 20 times. Okay, let me show you a simple score. 1/2, 3. Into my well-loved Dutch oven she goes with the lid on. I like to heat mine in my oven on 450 for about an hour before I bake, and while that's heating, the dough comes to temperature on the counter. After you put your bread in the oven, you're going to turn it down to 400. 20 minutes into the bake, you pull off the lid and you should see a big fluffy loaf that's not yet browned. Finish baking until it's completely golden and then pull and let it cool. Let's cut into this. You'll notice the crust is super bubbly. We'll talk more about that in just a moment, but first, look at this crumb. You can see she's nicely fermented with small uniform bubbles throughout. The structure is sturdy from a good shaping, and it's just an overall good loaf of bread. This is the perfect loaf if you're just looking for something really low fuss. If you're interested in more complicated techniques, I'll be doing that in another video. Now, I promised you guys some more ways to shape bread, so let's get into it. I get asked all the time if you can do the bulk ferment, then the cold ferment, and proceed to the shaping the next day. Yes, that's precisely what I did here. Again, I've designed this loaf to be flexible for you. Before we do the other shaping methods, let's look at my beginner's method one more time so you can see how it reacts with the cold dough. This bread will be just as good. It just takes a little bit more time because the dough is cold and stiff. Again, I'm using very little flour here. While we shape, let's talk about whether or not you need a Dutch oven. Beyond just being a good baking vessel for the bread, the purpose of the Dutch oven is so that we can steam the bread the first 20 minutes. We do this with the lid on so that it traps the moisture inside and helps give the rise that we want. Once you have some more experience under your belt, you can experiment with some open bakes. Okay, let's score this loaf and talk a little bit more about how to get those awesome bubbles on your crust. Beyond not adding much flour during the shaping, you'll notice I am not going to cover the surface with flour before I score. Now, while it can look nice and your designs will be a little bit more pronounced, it stops bubbles from forming on the surface. Okay, for our next dough dump, this is actually a double batch. You won't have any problems doubling this if you want 2 loaves. You can see here that I'm just going to cut it right in half. You can use a bench knife or even just a regular knife. Again, guys, work with what you got. Don't go spending a fortune on things right away when you're starting out. That being said, if you're curious what I use, everything will be below. If you're enjoying this video so far, we just ask that you leave a like, a comment, share this with a friend or a family member. It really helps our little channel grow. Back to the shaping. Okay, this is also a cold loaf. We're gonna press all the air out, and then we're just gonna go ahead and roll this up. You want it to be kind of tight, but don't worry too much. Drag it toward yourself. Press down again, and then we're gonna do a little bit of a gather and fold. This is a little bit more of a classic shape. And then we go ahead and roll onto itself again, pull toward you, and then we're going to just tuck and roll into a little bit of a bowl shape. I personally like this method better if you're going to bake a batard, but today we're doing all boules with our tea towel and deep bowl because it's great and perfect with what you might already have in your kitchen. For those who are new, a boule is a round shape and a batard is a longer, more of a rectangular shape. I'm just sort of bouncing the dough and clasping it closed on the bottom. If your hands feel a little sticky, just go ahead and roll the dough in the existing flour and you should be all right. Another note, guys, you can actually cold ferment this for up to 72 hours. I've gone as long as a week. I don't recommend it, but you can. After 72 hours, you won't quite have the oven spring that you're looking for, but cold fermenting it for that long can actually increase the sour flavor. Now, for this last shaping method, we're going to start the same way we did with the other one and just go ahead and fold her onto itself, bring her toward you, but we're gonna go ahead with the clasp and fold. So just like we did before, we're picking up and clasping from below. In a moment when I flip this dough over, you're going to see what I mean. We're literally picking the dough up, pinching and clasping it together. Just like this. So as you can see, there's more than one way to do this. It just depends on which one is right for you. Some days you'll bulk ferment and then you'll be too tired to want to shape, so you can put it in the fridge and shape the next day. It will be fine. Now, that's an example from my life, but you understand. If we're taking on a new hobby or project, we need to be flexible, and this dough is designed to be just that. Now, before we do our last two scores, do you need a bread lame? This, I would say yes. They are so cheap these days. I'll link mine below. You definitely don't want to skip it if you want your bread to be pretty. Now for our next basic scoring technique, right down the middle, I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of some cross dashes on the side, both sides, why not? And then we're going to open up the ear a little bit more by going right down the middle again. If your dough is properly fermented, you should see all of that action inside the dough when you score it. Okay, let me show you one more. Guys, with scoring, it's up to you. Do whatever you like. It really doesn't have to be perfect unless you're selling this bread. The point is to let steam escape. I went ahead and did some big dashes on one side, some little notches on the other, so we didn't have an explosion. If you want a bigger ear, just make sure you go back in the middle a little bit more and open it back up right before you put it in the oven. As we zoom in here, you can see all the blistering. The crust is crunchy. It's not dry or hard, but it's perfect and chewy, soft on the inside. Everything you could want in a sourdough loaf. As a chef of over 20 years, guys, I love to teach. I taught cooking classes for 5 years, and it's my mission to make beginners successful. In my next video, I'm going to show you how to make sourdough that's not just a loaf, and share with you guys some of my most trusted and favorite sourdough discard recipes. Write any questions you have in the comments, and I'll be showing you how to do some more cool stuff with bread in the future. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe so you don't miss a video, and I'll see you in the next one.